All right, what's going on, everyone? It's time for contest prep, update, talk, whatever we're calling it. Episode number 5. Myself, Ben Berluti, Tyler Wiebe, my coach and Pro Physique colleague. Tyler, what's going on?
Not much. I'm excited to kind of go through this. We spent 16 weeks kind of just building this up and updating, and then over the last 3 weeks, shows boom just like that. It's done and over with, like just like that,
Yeah,
right?
I
So
know. It's
yeah,
all that build
excited.
up, and then it's like it's over and it's over fast. So it's always like a little bit of a kind of like a bittersweet feeling, right? It's a weird
Yeah.
feeling to step off stage, but it's always very fulfilling too. But how about you after like your last show or even just other shows you've done? What were your feelings just like as you stepped off stage and next few days and all that?
Yeah. Can't wait to eat.
Can't wait to eat. Gotcha.
Yeah. But yeah, it is, and I know we'll talk about this, a little bit later when we're,
Yeah.
just kind of going over strategies and how to handle that post show period, because it is a whole new thing. It there's a certain weight off your shoulders, and not like it was a bad thing, right? But
Right.
prep is just it's all consuming, right? It's all you kind of think about. You're putting all of your energy into it, and it's over, and it's just like, oh, right? You kind of exhale a little bit of just like, all right, like I did it. It's done, it's over. And yeah, there's just kind of that weight off your shoulder.
Yeah, yeah, I feel the same thing, but it's always worth it when you do the best you can. And I kind of had an advantage with the hunger thing in this last show because we brought calories up so significantly. It was just like we were just kind of cruising,
Yeah.
going into
Yeah.
the show. So it's put me in a good spot. Like I said, we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. But yeah, like we talked about today, we're gonna do a recap because I did 2 shows after 4 weeks of diet, or 4 weeks, 4 months, 4 months of dieting here. So we started with the show 2.5 weeks ago and did the one 2 weeks later. As we filmed this, let's see, I am 5 days removed from the
Yeah.
last show. So the first one was 2 weeks before. And going into that show, we were starting to bring calories back up because at the depths of, the cut, macros are at 150 carb, 45 fat, and protein is so high at 185, and we had that one refeed day. But we started to gradually increase just to see how things were going, right?
Yeah.
And I know a couple weeks before it was like we were doing that during like the hurricane down here in Florida. But as we got to that last week, we are still able to bring things up. I think we were at 260 carb,
Yeah.
so somewhat filled out.
Yeah.
Um, and on that day, like I brought a pretty good package, but I think it was better a second time around. But what were some things you were seeing, as the coach on your end, between the check-ins and everything that you think was like important to know and would kind of help you go, okay, we need to make this adjustment. Let's hold steady here, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I mean, as one gets closer and closer, obviously we were doing check-ins every single day. We were doing check-ins twice a day, right?
Yeah.
Or yeah. We would do one in the morning, fasted. So just kind of seeing how you look when you're flat. And then, I always like having one, sometimes I'll do it like post-workout, right? Just to kind of see how we're looking after a bit of a pump. And then I do like having one later in the day when you've had most of your, so, your food in. So how do we actually look full, right? Because that's kind of the goal on stage is we want our nice
Right.
full look. So we're looking at food intake, we're paying attention to hydration status, we're looking at sodium intake, and then just yeah, how the body is looking. So that's really what we're looking at going into show day, and then show day, we kind of did something similar in terms of checking in, and having just basically check-ins once an hour with pictures. I know we would do a flat, or not a flat picture, but a little bit of a picture before a small little pump up. And
Yeah.
then I'd have you do a small pump up just with some bands, maybe some posing, really just to kind of shuttle some carbohydrates in, get the water moving, just blood flow going, and then hey, do we see any slight differences? Do we want to make any adjustments from there? And so, those are the biggest things that we're taking a look at. And for myself as a coach, it's me taking notes at every update of, all right, here's how much water we're at right now. Here's how much sodium we're at right now. Food itself on show day isn't going to play a massive effect on how one looks, but again, depending on the context, it's still something that we're gonna pay attention to, depending on when you step on stage. Your first show, it was, I mean, for me in the morning, for you early afternoon. So we didn't have a whole lot of food. We just didn't really need it. Whereas your second show, it wasn't until like 7 o'clock at night or something like that. So
Right.
that changes things a little bit where, okay, well, we're obviously not going to go a whole day without having whole foods. Like we're still going to have some importance on that. And so, also making sure that we're paying attention to that and timing that correctly.
Yeah, and for everyone watching, like Tyler's a great coach where he thought we talked about before. He mentioned like 3 check-ins a day. Like you're not bothering your coach when you're sending these updates as an athlete, especially when you're getting close to that stage. Because it's important to see what you're looking like fasted. It's important to see what you look like after workout to determine fullness. It's important to see what you look like after most of your meals are done for the day or all the meals, because it depends when you step on stage. Like we talked about, first show was in the morning, the second show was at night. All these things have an impact, right? So that is always very important. And yeah, we talk about the food, like it's not gonna make a huge difference in your look to an extent because it takes a couple days for carbs to be stored as glycogen to fully seat in the muscles, right? So if I'm trying to jam some carbs backstage, hey, it's not going to do anything really, right?
Oh,
We're
yeah.
just, I mean, it's more sodium and water manipulation at that point. And like leading up to show, especially like a month out, I really like to keep just everything exactly the same in terms of foods, right? Like I was just talking about this on my YouTube channel the other day, but I was like, had a Pop-Tart every single day before show. It's more like a pre-workout thing, like get a little extra energy going into the session. But even on off days, I was doing that because I just want to keep everything the same. I want to keep
Yeah.
sodium the same, I want to keep fluids the same just so we
Yeah.
could get a consistent, predictable result, right? And it was kind of funny at the first venue. It was freezing in there. It was so cold. So what I ended up doing, because they're running behind like they normally do at bodybuilding shows. So what I did was like, all right, I'm going outside. I'm just gonna go outside and stand in the sun. So that's what I did.
And
And
we noticed the difference. Like you could
yeah,
see the difference when you would step outside. Like, and I think, for people out there that might be competing, like if it's cold, you're gonna have a harder time holding your fullness. Like, and
right.
so you do then need to, again, checking in with your coach, like every hour, every whatever, 45 minutes, because we need to ensure that we're kind of keeping that fullness throughout the course of the day. And so, yeah, like just even something as trivial as that may seem, it can have a big impact on your physique on show day.
Definitely. Yeah. And I was able to just go, okay, well, it's about time to go back in. And, we went out and we did it. And, I was happy with the look at that show. I was happy with my posing and stuff. That's always what I'm most concerned about on show day because, I mean, besides fullness and everything, of
Yeah.
course, you
Yeah.
can't control anything else, right? It's like, oh, I need bigger pecs. I'm not going to get them on show day, right? So, you got what you got presented. Did I place as high as I thought I should have? No, but I got to get better, right? So, I mean, it's bodybuilding, it's not just you got to put together conditioning, presentation, and size. And still waiting on judges' feedback from this current show. But the goal is going to improve, put on some size. Well, let's fast forward a little bit. After that show, we did the Tampa show here 2 weeks later. And we started bringing up calories much more aggressively.
Yeah.
Something that was different from this prep versus my last one was on competition week. besides making these gradual increases in carbs, Tyler, we roughly kept sodium and fluid the same. It wasn't like, okay, today we're having this much extra fluid, this much extra sodium. It was more like, let's just see how things are looking and adjust from there.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yep.
what was your rationale there? If all the increases and keeping things the same and all that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, we kind of touched on is keep things as predictable as possible.
Yeah.
Um, and really, you're I think you're going to see the biggest changes on show day, right? Because at this point, you should have already gone through a bit of a metabolic building phase
Right.
where you've gotten lean enough 3, 4 weeks before a show, and now you're able to start bringing calories up. You might play with water and sodium a little bit, but those things, again, if you're, let's say, 24, 48 hours prior, I mean, that's probably, more than likely it's kind of flushed out already in the system by the
Yeah.
time you're at that show day. And so, again, depending on when one is competing, I mean, if you're on first thing in the morning, yeah, maybe there's going to be, hey, like, let's have a little bit more water and sodium the night before so we can wake up a little bit harder and maybe not have to load so quickly.
That's a really good point.
But you can't have really, and you can't overload water on show day, right? Like that's not going to happen. Sodium, you can potentially do too much and get some spillover effect, but you're still gonna pretty much have that baseline goal of hitting a normal sodium intake before stepping on stage. I know we were pretty much right there at around that 2,000 milligrams by the time you stepped on stage. I think we went a little bit more. We had some pickles right before, so you might have been
Yeah.
2,300-ish, right?
Yeah.
Right, yeah, right in there. So we did have just a little bit more, but because we had a full day to really just gradually bring you up, it made it that much easier for us to just take it hour by hour and really kind of hit your baseline totals plus a little bit more to really bring in that tightness right as you stepped on stage. And so, yeah, like I think that's where it really kind of came from is, hey, keep things the same. We don't want to introduce atypical things because I
Right.
mean, what if we did go 2,500 milligrams of sodium on the Friday night and then we spill over Saturday morning? Well, now you're kind of in panic, not panic mode, but it's like, oh shit, like now we
Yeah.
have to readjust our whole Saturday to make sure we can now flush the system out. And now we're increasing a risk of not looking your best as you take that step on stage.
Right. And think about things you have to do to flush your system out. So many things are going to be stressing your body out, right? Like, oh, let's go do some cardio and not work up a sweat that's going to ruin the tan. Yeah, that would be a good, very stressful. Like on show day, I was able to go to the venue and get my tan in the morning, and then I came home and I took a nap. Like I was like, I'm just able to chill, you know?
Awesome, right? That's what
Yeah.
you like. You're not having a cortisol response, right? Because now you're stressed. Like you want to go into it as relaxed as possible.
Right. Yeah, and like I think that was my best look to date, this third show, the most fullest. And like we talked about the week of or those that 2 week window there when we're bringing calories up, like we got carbs all the way up to 350,
Yeah,
345. And I was noticing with my posing, I was having some trouble getting to my back pose. So like there was muscle here that wasn't here a couple weeks ago. It feels
yeah,
weird.
yeah,
And it's just funny. There's more real estate to work with, right? Like I always talk about like the big men's physique guys who are like on stage at 220, 230. I'm like, man, I'm like, that back pose, the front pose looks so easy because there's just so much more there. You just simply go like this and you look very wide, right? But it's like you get that feeling, and it's a good feeling. So that's why I felt confident, felt good. And yeah, just had a great time up there, and like I don't know about you, Tyler, but like when I'm on stage, just because I've done everything I could in prep of practicing posing and everything, I'm never nervous. I'm just enjoying it and I'm just very focused, right? Like I'm not so stressed out that I forget everything, one of those things. The only time I
yep.
get nervous is for my individual routine or something because I try to put a lot into that. So I'm just try and remember the choreography, but beyond that, I'm not really nervous. But how about you? Because it's a personality thing.
Yeah. I mean, I've only done, two shows in my life. It's always been kind of a one and done. And so, I think I had 3 or 4 years or so in between my first show and my second show. There was some nervousness just because it had
Yeah,
been so
unknowns.
long. And there is just something about like get like that first time you step back on that stage, the lights, the camera, just all of that where
Yeah,
the mind can just go blank a little bit, right?
yeah,
But I think though, like that's where you're practicing your posing, right? And it just that second nature of all of that practice then just comes into play. And like that's what I tell all of my athletes, like you just want to make sure that you have that there because there is that chance your mind goes blank, right?
yeah.
And it's not really thinking, and that can be common. And so to have just then the habit take over is going to serve you so well. And I mean, I don't know about you, but like I do not like practice my pose. Like I hate practicing posing. It's
Right.
boring to me. But
Right.
it pays off in the end when you do step on that stage. And I think we've mentioned it here before of you don't want to go through all of this hard work of prep and have your posing be shit because
Right.
that's where you actually get to show off that physique.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I want my posing to look as best as it can, but I don't enjoy practicing it because it's not easy. It's like doing cardio, right? On top of doing cardio and training, right? So it's just another thing you gotta be disciplined with,
Yeah,
right? But
exactly.
yeah, when you're able to do it well, it's cool. Um, yeah, and then like other things that could stress you out, like real quick, just something that happened at the last show. So you get 2 coats of tan typically night before, day of, and that show was earlier in the day. So in the morning, I was pouring some water into my shaker cup, and some splashed out and hit me in the chest. Now I just bare spot my chest. I was like, oh. So like I was staying at the venue of the show, and the tanning was at the check-in venue. So I had like to drive over there to get touch up, and they sent me back like, oh, we're gonna do it backstage, and like stuff like that comes up, right? Like,
Yeah, well, at my last show, I forgot my number at my Airbnb.
oh
Showed up,
no,
going through everything, and like big stress. I mean, thankfully, like my wife was there, so
yeah,
she ran back, got it for me. Like she was, my backstage help.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like there's just sometimes things happen, at show day that you don't know what's gonna happen. It might cause stress.
Wow, yeah, I was scared to death of losing my competitor numbers. I like put it, yeah, I put it like in the glove box of my car. I'm like, okay, like took a picture of it, set a reminder on my phone. Like, I know
Yeah,
where this damn thing is, right? Like,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
funny.
exactly.
At least I remember where it was. But anyway, before we get into some of the post-show strategies for
Yeah.
success that others can kind of glean from, what the judges are going to tell me is, oh, conditioning was good, posing was good. Let's just get bigger, right? So, for myself, what would be my best course of action in terms of like, target, body weight goals, just because we have that data, right? Lengths of off season, as a coach, what's kind of on your mind. It's hard to pinpoint exact numbers, so just kind of what you think.
Yeah, it obviously can depend on, how long is the athlete going to take off, right? That can play a big role. And now for bodybuilding and males, right? Like
Yeah,
we are just going to have to take more time off, right? Than compared to say like a bikini competitor, or, I would say that's probably the biggest one. Figure is still like almost like a men's bodybuilding where you need a bit more. 3, 4 years, I would say, like just the more time you can spend building muscle, the better, right?
yeah,
Because that is that main focus. And if you want to improve your physique, that's what you're going to need to do.
yeah,
And I think also an important thing to consider is your stage weight may never really change, right? Like you might be a couple pounds heavier over the course of a career, but it's not like you're ever going to jump 10 pounds. Like that just isn't going to happen for a natural athlete.
right,
And so the density of the muscle just becomes a much, much better, right? It just becomes denser. But you're probably always going to be around that, whatever, 140, 145, right?
right.
Uh, So when we're looking at off-season gains, the rule of thumb I always kind of pay attention to is you never want more than 30 pounds to lose in a prep, right? And even that's probably pushing it. You're
Yeah.
probably looking at 20, 25 pounds where you wouldn't want that. Like, so that's always going to be kind of my cap for someone. Obviously, pay attention to their pictures. What does their initial reverse look like? Did we initially gain maybe a little bit too much body fat, or did we handle it pretty well and it was a nice steady gain? That's going to come into play. And so we are looking at kind of that range in the sense of, where do we want to get to?
Right.
We want to cap it. And then obviously we want to look, get that judge's feedback of where do we need to improve that musculature? What is going to be our main focus, within our training? And I mean, I know you sent me some pictures last night on a really great shot of comparison between
Yeah.
the winner and you, right? And we can take that judge's feedback, but then we can also take a look at those pictures and go, yeah, we can definitely now target some areas of this is where we certainly need to improve. And I mean, I think we're both in agreement. Chest certainly need a bit more depth.
Yeah.
There. I mean, shoulders, that's always going to be a great one for men's physique to give you the illusion of a tinier waist. I think for you, you have a bit blockier of a waist, right? And that's just your
Right.
anatomy. So you then have to, you're never going to beat someone that just has a tinier waist than you, right? That's
Right.
genetics, that's anatomy. So for you to now build up that
Get
upper
these
portion
wider.
of your
Yeah.
body, that's going to help give the illusion of a tinier waist and help maybe hide some of that anatomy that we just can't change.
Right, and that's a cool thing about bodybuilding where you're kind of sculpting that physique, you know? But yeah, I love those insights. Yeah, 30 pounds max because I was 13 pounds over where I was like in my last off season before starting this prep, 13 pounds, took 4 months, a little over 4 months to get in shape for the show. So yeah, 30 pounds over more than that would create a prep from hell, you know? But so you want to give yourself enough room to go. Really quick, what are
Yep.
your thoughts on, let's say you add, 15 pounds gradually after showing, like not all at once, just in a good
Yep.
structured manner, a good reverse. What are your thoughts of growing into a weight as opposed to this continuous like increase? Let's say you take a 3 year off season, right? Let's say you get up 15, 20 pounds above stage weight and then you stay there and you keep growing. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like I mean, you certainly don't need the scale to continually go up to build muscle, right? Like
Right.
you can just be in a maintenance and still build muscle. Like that still very is, very much possible. So I don't see any issue with that. And it could be one of those things too where, if you are planning 3 or 4 years off, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, you know what? At some point, I might do a 12-week cut just to kind of get you a little back, a little excuse me, a little bit closer back to that 20, 25 pound cap, right? Where it's like, hey, maybe I do want to push things a little bit, gonna get a little fluffier, knowing though that I'm gonna give myself 12 weeks at some point to get back down to be a little bit, better body composition.
Yeah, I really love that point. That's a really great consideration, very important as well. All right, let's dive into the post-show strategies for success. And anyone after a fat loss phase can, glean something from this. Like after, this week, my weight is basically the same as it was on show day because I'm just very structured with things in my reverse here. But I know for a lot of folks, it could be tough, if you don't plan it ahead of time. Because if you don't have that plan, you're going to struggle big time, right? So, what are some of your approaches with athletes, after they step off stage so that, you're able to gain some weight and improve while still not, blowing up the reverse and kind of going off the edge?
Yeah, I mean, usually I will automatically add in food, right? And I'll typically look at maybe where our last refeeds were at. I mean, if we've gone through a metabolic building phase like we did with you, you can probably start there roughly because we've already kind of brought your metabolism back up to maintenance. And so you're already in a pretty good spot. And I think that's always the ultimate goal. Uh,
Yeah.
But if someone hasn't quite gotten there, I'm gonna probably look at those refeed numbers and where were those refeed numbers prior to peak week, the show, that kind of stuff, and look at starting in and around there because hunger and the desire, the psychological desire to
Yeah,
eat food is just so prevalent, right? And so it's this fine balance of getting someone more food so that they can just feel better, but also not in a manner where we're going to just start putting on body fat. Like
right,
that's something that we do. Like we want to put on body fat, but we don't want to do it too rapidly because we're in a state right now where the body could potentially produce new body fat cells, right? So, we have a set amount of body fat cells. We don't lose them when we lose body fat. They just get smaller, right?
right,
That's what happens. And then when we gain body fat back, they increase again,
right.
right? But when we get to these levels of leanness, and if we overeat too much, the body can now produce new one. And so we want to make sure that we're staying away from that. So it can be very much context dependent on the athlete and how
Of
they're
course.
handling things. But that's typically where I'll start. And then obviously we're having our weekly check-ins. We're monitoring their weight gain, their body composition, how they're feeling psychologically, that kind of stuff. But that would be how I would initially start things.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head. There's really not a whole lot to add to that, but it's important to assess with the athlete after that, like, or even probably before you get to that goal and afterwards, like, hey, we can gain body fat a little bit faster if needed. But and our goal is to improve your overall sense of well-being, right? The way that you feel. I mean, hormones are impacted, right? Hunger levels, like we want to improve all of these markers, right? So, like, if someone's really struggling and they're like, I just want to feel like a human again, if they're at that point, which I wasn't, fortunately, because we had this good metabolic building phase. But it's like, hey, like the smart people call it the recovery diet these days, as opposed to reverse, or like, hey, maybe we're making more of an aggressive increase in calories to get you to a good place, but still controlled, right? Like the discipline you need in a reverse is means we're still tracking our food, right? Like we're just having more of those foods, and we're gonna be in a better place. And the hardest part is psychologically, but when you're able to understand that you can only improve if you add weight and body fat, and your health improves when you add weight and body fat in a reasonable amount, that it helps you go, oh, okay, yeah, this is putting me in a much better place.
Yep. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think, a couple of points there, that you made, I think that, just to kind of really touch on is, one, keeping the foods that you consume the same. Like that is important because what a lot of people will want to do is just, lift the lid, right? Like I can have cookies, pizza, things like
Right,
that. And maybe we allow for a little bit, but what that can do is that can just really send those hunger hormones just wild. And you're gonna really increase that risk of binging, right? And
right,
gaining body fat. And so really trying to keep things the same, but just eating more of those is gonna be really important. There was that second one, but now I'm blanking on it. But I think, yeah, no, yeah, that's what it was, is treating it still like prep in terms of your tracking, right?
right,
And I know that can be quite difficult because you just spent 6 months tracking every single little thing, the last 4 to 5 weeks tracking your water and your sodium. And that is, it's mentally exhausting to do that. And the last thing you might want to do is continue to track things to that kind of level. And not to say that we have to be tracking sodium and water anymore. Maybe you don't track sauces or condiments, but we do want to make sure that maybe for that next 6 to 8 weeks, as we come out, we're still tracking at a high level,
yeah.
knowing that if we can still do that for just a couple more months, we can continue then to back off some of that high level tracking once we've gotten there. And so
Right.
really just continuing to stay there is going to just then set you up for that next few years of building.
Yeah, and something that prep does teaches you and kind of forces you to learn is being structured with things. So you find that it can be easier to be structured with nutrition, but in a practical sense, not going out to eat every single night is something that's going to help, right? Making your own foods, keeping the ingredients to a few, right? We were talking about right before we hit record. Like I have chicken, rice, broccoli, and it was like 10 grams of sugar-free teriyaki during prep. That was like my dinner, right? Well, I wanted to make a little bit of a change up, so I turned it into like a Chipotle bowl where it's chicken, rice, broccoli, 30 grams light sour cream, 30 grams salsa, some
Yeah.
beans, right? Like it's nothing extremely
Yep.
drastically changed. It's just, and it makes it easier because if you enjoy what you eat, it's going to make the whole process sustainable for your life,
Yeah.
right? So that's how I've always looked at it. That's how I've been able to, sustain progress. But
Yeah, and I mean, it again, depending on the person though, like if we talk and it's like, hey, you know what? One free meal in a week, like initially would be just really beneficial. All right, let's get
yeah,
that free meal, right? Like where we're not
definitely.
back. You're gonna go out for a pizza and a beer or a burger and a beer or whatever that might look like. But like let's plan for that. Let's make sure that we're still being smart about it and we don't let it get away from us. And I think
Absolutely.
it still is important to note that a binge might happen. A
Yeah.
bad night might happen. There's a good chance it will, right? Because it
Yeah.
is just a really hard time. I think the important thing though is not to let it turn into 2 days, 3 days, 4 days.
Right.
That's where you start to get into trouble. You're not going to gain 5 pounds of body fat in one day, in one night. It's not going to happen. But it's when it starts to turn into consecutive days, that's where we start to get into trouble. And so it's important to note that if you do have a day or night like that, just we got to get back on track, go get a good workout in, and you're gonna be fine.
Right. Yeah. Like I always say to people is learn from that, right? Because like you said, we're gonna slip up, but learn from that and reflect on, do I like the way I felt afterwards? Like my digestion was off for 3 days. I like the way that felt. Not really, right? So maybe next time it's going to be one piece of pie instead of the whole pie or something, right? Like, and that it just puts you in a better space,
Yeah, not a
but
whole pack of Oreos like I did.
there we go.
Yeah,
Oreos are yours, huh? I like Oreos on ice cream. I think
yeah, yeah.
that's better.
Mine was in peanut butter. I guess
Oh,
just to even
okay.
say that too, then is if you know you have a certain trigger food, just don't have it in the house. Like
Yes.
important, it can be very tempting to go again and go like, I'm free, I can eat, I want Oreo. Like it can be just don't have it in the house because if it is there, it's just going to make it that much harder to
Yeah.
not. You'll tell yourself just three. Let me tell you, three turns into a whole pack. I've done it.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a great point, because a lot of people talk about like hoarding post-show treats, post-diet treats. You're putting yourself in a tough spot. If I want to reach and grab an Oreo, I'm gonna have to drive to the grocery store to get them, right? Create that barrier to entry. It's really gonna help as well. That's a great point, right? So yeah, no, I think this was a really solid recap, Tyler, because we are able to recap that and touch on that sort of thing. But yeah, I think we can wrap it up here. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Yeah. Do we want a quick touch on cardio?
Yeah,
How to kind of manage that?
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know.
with
I know we got a couple
cardio.
minutes.
Yeah, so I mean, my thought process of rationale, what I do is I don't eliminate it.
Yeah.
I just start pulling back a little bit, right?
Yep.
And so let's say we were up to doing, cardio daily. Maybe we're shaving off a session, to start off, or even less, right? Kind of depends where athlete's at. But yeah, you definitely want to start pulling back on that as you bring calories up. What are your thoughts?
Same. Incremental. If they're doing a ton of steady state cardio, that I very much try to bring down just because that can be pretty boring and it's a lot of time too, right? And so I would
Yeah.
prefer to start giving that person more time to be spent training and recovering. So incrementally bringing that down, like you said, maybe one full session to initially start. So we're at least now one day out of the gym. it can be dependent, but incrementally bringing that down, monitoring that in terms of how they're feeling, what their energy is like, are they still kind of enjoying it or not, and then how the body's responding.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to sum it up. Like, if my training this week, deload week, like I'm still training 5 days, but like I was deadlifting the other day, it was like 3 sets of 5 at RPE 0. It's just like going through the motion. You get it, getting a pump and that sort of thing, but it's recovery that we're going for, and
Yeah,
yeah, we're
yeah.
good to go. So yeah,
Okay.
we'll wrap it up there. Hey, great talk today, and I think Zoom is going to cut us off anyway. So thanks so much for coming on, Tyler,
Yeah.
and thanks everyone for watching.
Thanks.